Good morning.
After becoming a top-selling franchise on the PlayStation, Tekken had established itself as one of Namco's most lucrative properties, so it was only natural for the publisher to look into how else they could make use of the brand among its portfolio. As a fighting game, Tekken had the inherent benefit of featuring a number of characters that became popular to fans over the years. Their earliest endeavors of designing a Tekken game on a non-PlayStation platform or in another genre were radically different than what fans may have been accustomed to, and while some could be regarded as a technical achievement for its time, these games have largely been forgotten by players today. Individual characters from Tekken often made cameo appearances in a number of other Namco-developed games, but the first one to have a starring role was the series' popular assassin Nina Williams in the character action game Death by Degrees, released on the PlayStation 2 in 2005. Death by Degrees featured level design consisting of the types of puzzle solving and item collecting established in other games like Resident Evil, while there were cameo appearances from other Tekken characters like Anna Williams and Heihachi Mishima. The game's story had Nina Williams embark on an espionage mission featuring such popular tropes as stopping a criminal organization with a world-threatening superweapon in its possession, boss fights with eccentric characters, and even having the protagonist partner with a reluctant scientist whose particular expertise is being exploited by said organization. Most protagonists in character action games such as this would normally become regarded for their sharp wit or memorable one-liners, but here Nina Williams isn't given much to make her a more interesting or compelling character. While players are given some backstory into Nina's traumatic childhood related to her father and sister, throughout the game she's mostly portrayed stoically listening to other characters as they exposit additional backstory or as an item for the male characters to ogle.
Not a bad view.
A pity. Your dress is ruined.
But the biggest deal breaker for a lot of the game's potential audience came down to its divisive control scheme. Mapping both the player's movement and attack options to the controller's analog sticks offered players the ability to combat multiple enemies at once, but it came at the cost of precision, a problem that was only magnified thanks to fixed camera angles, making navigation more dated. With such an essential gameplay feature being considered flawed by many, it didn't matter if other aspects of the game like its production value could be worthy of merit. No matter what else Death by Degrees attempted to be, it became regarded as a video game that failed at everything. After the poor reception to Death by Degrees and Namco's merger with Bandai, the possibility of another game starring a sole character from Tekken was no longer considered a viable option. Instead, characters from Tekken would be presented as part of an ensemble, relying on the strength of the brand or, in some cases, the collective appeal of other companies' brands in order to promote a video game. Fans of Tekken are most familiar with Namco collaborating with other companies like Capcom and Sega to produce crossover fighting games and RPGs, but one of its lesser known but just as odd collaborations was Queensgate Spiral Chaos, a turn-based strategy game released on the PlayStation Portable in 2011. While the earlier games mentioned were designed to appeal to a mass audience, this particular game was notorious for portraying its ensemble of attractive female characters in numerous compromising or highly suggestive positions. The game featured a number of female characters from other video games by Namco, as well as other companies like SNK and Arc System Works. The sole character from Tekken in this game was Lily Rochford, who is predominantly featured throughout as someone who becomes just as aroused by the other girls as the male characters. Another notable feature in this game that added to its notoriety was a minigame where the male character can form a relationship with a number of the girls to inevitably engage in the so-called kiss mode, and seeing as how this game was made for a device with a large screen that one can hold in their hands, that's exactly what the developers intended for the player to do.
さあ、早く。まだですの？じらす技をお持ちなんて。でも、そんなあなたが、私は。
What?
The fighting game boom of the 1990s led to many quick adaptations being released in Japan. While Street Fighter's animated film was highly regarded and even became influential on the future installments of the series, many other fighting game adaptations were not as fortunate. Tekken received similar treatment in the form of two 30-minute specials that would later be combined into a 1-hour film called Tekken the Motion Picture in 1998. This movie was a loose adaptation of the events during the first two Tekken games leading to Tekken 3. The story centers on Jun Kazama, who is given much more backstory. Here, Jun and Kazuya Mishima are portrayed as childhood friends, and their relationship is the main crutch of the narrative, compared to the game where it's relatively non-existent. While a couple characters are identical to their game counterparts, most are given so little screen time that they're either shoved into a quick panning shot or leave a scene just as quickly as they entered it. The movie's low-quality animation makes the action scenes a chore to sit through, if they weren't also hilariously awful.
What's wrong?
With its subpar writing, poor voice acting, awkward use of licensed music, and a bunch of needless exposition crammed into its short running time, Tekken the Motion Picture has become widely regarded as being a complete mess from beginning to end that only the most die-hard fans can find entertaining. With its release, the bar for future adaptations was set pretty low, but as time would show, it was a standard that others could barely rise above. The film rights for a live-action adaptation based on Tekken were picked up by an independent production company called Crystal Sky Pictures. The movie released in 2010 and was produced by Stephen Paul, whose track record is just as bad as the director and writer for this project. The story takes place in a post-war dystopian world run by corporations, collectively known as Iron Fist. The most powerful of these corporations is known as Tekken, which also translates to Iron Fist, and serves as the host of an international tournament held in Tekken City.
What?
The story plays out like many other derivative action films involving a tournament, and is filled to the brim with one-dimensional characters. The most notable actors among the cast are Kari Hiroyuki Tagawa as Heihachi Mishima, and Ian Anthony Dale as Kazuya Mishima, who both feel like they're doing the best they can with the script and material they're given, but the focus is kept on John Fu, who plays Jin Kazama. And while Fu is a well-regarded stuntman in his own right, he comes off as a very bad actor here, who lacks the natural charisma or the kind of on-screen presence expected for a protagonist like Jin.
I'm just saying, an attitude like that is gonna get you in trouble.
Guess I should be more in control. Like you.
So, who taught you to fight?
My mother.
Your mother? No way.
She's dead. And what did anyone do about it? Nothing. What does anyone ever do about it? Nothing! He's gonna pay for what he has done.
Martial arts fans may be familiar with Gary Daniels, who plays Brian Fury, but is also known for portraying Kenshiro in the live-action adaptation of Fist of the North Star, or playing a henchman opposite Jackie Chan in City Hunter, where he portrays Ken Masters in that movie's infamous Street Fighter segment. A lot of actors are dressed in costume to appear similar to their game counterparts, and do the most work at selling the audience on their character.
You know where you are? This is Iron Fist!
But a number of decisions by the filmmakers just make them stand out in a bad way. For starters, the film's attempt to have a gritty tone and take itself very seriously, while still paying homage to the series' character designs and lore, falls flat, because it isn't accompanied with any of the irreverent tendencies that imparted a lot of the game's much-needed levity. Generally, bad lighting is featured throughout, which is normally used to mask a low budget and small number of filming locations, but here it also ruins a lot of action scenes. While the choreography can be decent at times, it's surrounded by quick edits. stunts, a common technique to hide the actor's lack of actual fighting skills or inability to pull off more complicated stunts, but again, it just makes them come off generally unconvincing or very hard to watch, even when performed by professionals like Fu and Daniels. Series director Katsuhiro Harada has often stated how he despises this film adaptation. According to Harada, the game developers were not able to supervise the project to an extent that was acceptable due to a cruel and binding contract. The movie was another disappointment, both to fans and its producers, as it failed to make back much of its production budget. Even so, the film managed to receive a follow-up just a couple years later. The first Tekken film ends on a cliffhanger, potentially setting up the foundation for a sequel, but in 2014, Crystal Sky Pictures and returning producer Stephen Paul released Tekken 2, Kazuya's Revenge, and it somehow manages to be even worse. Despite the title's implication, this movie is actually a prequel to the first film, but even after all its plot twists and revelations, there is still very little coherent connection. The film barely resembles anything associated with Tekken outside of character names and reused stock footage from the first movie. The worst action scenes are even more unconvincing, and even when one surfaces that is close to being watchable, it's not enough to make up for the long stretches of time where nothing substantial is happening on screen, as if the filmmakers were doing whatever they can to stretch the runtime long enough to be considered a feature-length film. Kane Kosugi, an actor related to a venerable martial artist, portrays Kazuya Mishima and is constantly hampered by a script with nothing good for him to work with.
I don't like guns.
Yeah, we need to find out whether you can shoot or not.
I don't like guns.
A long time ago, over 1 billion people believed in Allah, over 2 billion in Jesus Christ, and a few in L. Ron Hubbard.
I have no idea who you're talking about.
As long as I get paid, I ain't complaining.
Gary Daniels and Kari Hiroyuki Tagawa reprise their roles from the first film, but barely resemble their original characters, in what amounts to thankless cameos probably done for the sake of a quick paycheck. There's no other way to describe this movie other than absolutely terrible. It's easily one of the worst adaptations of all time. Kazuya's Revenge is the kind of film so dead on arrival, most fans of Tekken are probably not even aware of its existence, and to be honest, they're better off that way. But even with 2 bombs on their hands, there have already been reports of another live-action Tekken film in the works, with Stephen Paul once again attached as a producer. With so many disappointing adaptations throughout Tekken's history, it was easy to believe that if only the game's original developers were put in charge of making one, it would result in a guaranteed success. In 2011, Bandai Namco did just that when they announced Tekken Blood Vengeance. The film would be produced by Digital Frontier, the company responsible for making the cutscenes in the recent Tekken games. Dai Sato was a screenwriter famous for working on many high-profile anime and video games, and placed in charge of writing the story for Blood Vengeance. During the film's promotion, Harada made it clear that this film would be retribution for all the fans who wanted a good film based on Tekken, and had to endure all the bad adaptations that came before it. At the same time, he also promised that this would be a movie enjoyable to both fans and those unfamiliar with the series. Dai Sato was a self-proclaimed fan of the Tekken series, and supposedly given a lot of creative freedom when it came to writing the script. Harada stated that he always viewed the characters in the game as just a collection of data, but after completing this film, he felt he could now see them as more human and emotionally engaging than ever before. Tekken Blood Vengeance would eventually be released as part of the Tekken Hybrid compilation on the PlayStation 3, and on the Nintendo 3DS as part of Tekken 3D Prime Edition the following year. From a production standpoint, the designers at Digital Frontier live up to their reputation by delivering action scenes on par with anything they've produced for the Tekken video games. But the biggest problems with Blood Vengeance stem from the filmmaker's failed attempt of making a compelling narrative using the film medium. The story takes place between the events of Tekken 5 and 6, where Jin is shown clashing with his father Kazuya and Heihachi is believed to be dead. But instead of the focus of the movie being on them, as it has in the games, Blood Vengeance spends most of its time with Ling Xiaoyu, Elisa Paskanovich, and a newly created MacGuffin. The majority of Blood Vengeance is spent setting up a new character named Shin Kamiya, whose involuntary possession of the Devil Gene leads him to seek revenge against Heihachi Mishima, none of which is actually mentioned or explored until the last third of the film because, again, the focus is on Xiaoyu and Alyssa interacting with each other. Other characters have cameo appearances that either don't make sense given their portrayal in the games, or would only make sense to viewers already familiar with them from the games. The majority of the film has Xiaoyu and Alyssa spouting dialogue that's delivered in a way to be intentionally funny or endearing.
Whoa, this is like going to the the mall. Check it out.
You're right, it is.
Oh, right, I forgot.
Just as much as they are given dialogue that's supposed to be taken seriously but comes off just sounding stupid.
Alyssa, you're just like a refrigerator.
Huh?
When I was a little girl, I'd press my cheek up to the fridge at home. It was kind of warm to the touch, and the hum was sort of comforting.
As your refrigerator, I promise to do my best.
What?
Xiao Yu is initially portrayed as a good-natured, if not shallow, high school girl fans are familiar with, but the events in the storyline transform her into a cynical and misanthropic person so quickly for the sake of an emotional climax that it's incredibly unconvincing because it doesn't feel deserved at all.
Humans should just
That feeling is only enhanced in the following scene where she's back to normal and somehow reaches the same conclusion as her game counterpart.
Know how to achieve world peace? We should get the whole wide world to turn into one big amusement park.
So then, your dream is a global theme park?
Yep. Then that way everyone will be happy.
Shin Kamiya, a character who's not given enough screen time to be compelling outside of a forced plot device, is expected to defeat Tekken staple Heihachi Mishima, and the audience is supposed to be surprised or upset when he loses.
What?
Any chance to delve into the conflicts hinted at among the Mishima family are just as glossed over as they were in the video game, but whereas it served as a sufficient backdrop for a fighting game, it doesn't work as well here as the climax for the movie. Sure, fans get to see their favorite characters fight each other, but not for the reasons they'd want to see them fight each other. Instead, the fight scenes just come off as perfunctory and lack any of its intended weight or connective tissue to the rest of the film. Being a feature-length film instead of a video game filled with cinematics, Blood Vengeance could have had the opportunity to portray the conflicts between these characters with more nuance or introspection. When characters are shown fighting in the game, the cutscenes served as an appetizer or the ending to a punchline rewarded to the player for completing the game. In the movie, there is so little setup for the characters to fight outside of motives only known to die-hard fans. To make matters worse, following every fight scene, the characters are shown doing as little as they can to end the scene and move on to the next. So the chance to experience how or why they would engage or simply proceed following a victory or loss is left hanging, making the entire sequence all the more pointless because it ultimately has little impact on the narrative or the characters themselves. Perhaps having the film just focus on the familiar characters interacting with each other could have made for a more tolerable narrative, maybe even a more enjoyable one, but having it all tie back to a character set up for something he had no chance of accomplishing resulted in a forgettable film with some nice looking fight scenes thrown in to reward viewers who stuck around long enough to see them. Even though the fight scenes can amaze fans who always enjoy seeing their favorite characters clash, if they want to experience the best this movie can offer, they can just as easily look up these clips online where they're separate from the rest of the film. And that's where Tekken Blood Vengeance ultimately fails in the same ways as every other adaptation. Despite Harada's assurances, everyone in this movie feels less like a developed character and more like a collection of data consisting of familiar and tired tropes, making them just as empty and emotionally hollow. Anyone who's grown attached to a long-running series or franchise in their lives always has a reason that makes them want to come back for more. Sometimes they become so endeared to its universe of characters and themes that they want to embrace more of it because the things it does well are so exceptional that any known flaws can be overlooked. Perhaps the reason many of Tekken's adaptations are seen as failures is because the ones making them have no faith in their audience being compelled by the source material on its own merits, so they feel they have to go out of their way to justify their adaptation's existence, only to give them something that feels blatantly artificial and immediately shallow. While blame could be pointed at filmmakers who just don't want to embrace the material, it's a criticism that could also be directed at Kazuhiro Harada and his team of designers who've created a series that's notoriously consistent at being inconsistent.
正直、僕はもうゲームプレイとゲームのシステムをやっぱりガーッとやってディレクションしていく方なんで、キャラクターの設定だとかストーリーは原さんここどうなってますってスタッフに聞かれるか取材で聞かれて
出来上がってるんですね。
要はこいつはこれムカつくからですとか。
Whether it be skirting responsibility for the reception of the film adaptation he previously promoted, or denying accountability for the past games he's worked on, Harada has often displayed little empathy for the characters and lore of Tekken, consequentially making elements throughout its established history all the more redundant and superficial.
いや僕らとしてはこれ結構ラッキーキャラで、このキャラを大体作ろうって言った時もそのゲームの方で新キャラクターを増やします、ワンスロットどうしますかって。で僕はやっぱりほら設定とかあんまり考えないので要件だけ出したんですよ。ロボット、女性、頭取れる、手取れる、足取れる、最初は胴体も取れるとか、もう全部取れる、全部バラバラになる女ロボットって書いて、でそれだけでデザイナーに渡したんですよ。ビジュアルデザイナーとか企画に渡して帰ってきたのがたまたまこういうキャラだったんですよ。
そういうの大事なんですね。これだってアリサもう5分かかってないわけですね。
いやもうアリサはもうほんと5分どころじゃないです。これ
5秒ぐらい
もう必要要件なんですかって言われてパッパッパってあげただけでした。もうチェーンソー頭取れる女の子ロボットですから。
ほらいやそのぐらいがいい。
そうです。真剣に考えたキャラとか真剣に考えたシリーズほど売れてないですね。
It's an unfortunate situation for those who become attached to the series for what it is, because as outlandish as Tekken has gotten throughout its lifetime, there was still something there people found compelling, endearing, or even relatable, even if to a small degree. Whether it be a character striving for revenge, power, passion, or glory, those are all traits many can understand or find appealing. Even as its history has been plagued with less than desirable adaptations, its fans haven't stopped wanting to see their favorite characters interacting with each other, whether in the numerous games or adaptations of their own. That's because, for all its strengths and weaknesses, they fully embrace the characters and its related subject matter, and are proud to be a part of it in some way. It's the kind of sensation fans would always want designers to have when making their own adaptations, with access to better tools and higher production values. But if the mistakes of the past are never learned or even acknowledged, they are bound to inevitably repeat them and end up with the same results.